everybody. Welcome back to the Dr. Denisha Keeney Show. Super excited to have you here. This is a kitchen table conversation. We're going to be talking about I wouldn't say new topic. It's actually kind of a topic that is in the mom world and parent world all of the time. But as the three rules go, is that we're here to have a conversation. So what does that look like is us asking questions to understand the other person on the other side, not speaking over each other, not yelling over each other, but really coming to the table to understand. And we're inviting you to be the fly on that wall to hear how we would navigate this conversation, to have a conversation of understanding, not just listening to respond. So I'm going to have Hannah take it away. We're going to be talking about a interesting topic today, and I think that this is one that a lot of parents would appreciate. So go ahead, Hannah, take it away.
All right. So I am coming to the table as a public schooled child, now adult with her own children, who is homeschooling. And I got to thinking, how is this impacting my children? How was public school impacting me growing up into wanting to preserve them and shield them from certain things? We actually just yesterday had a public school that is just a county over that had a school shooting threat. And unfortunately, the child, she's legally an adult, had reached out for mental health and did not get the help she received. And so I got to thinking, like, man, my children have an abundance of help and listening ears. Both my husband and I are home. There are other adults that are constantly in and out of co-ops. Like, it is just such a hands-on environment because it's so close-knit.
Right.
And I think, man, what changed in how we perceive public school versus homeschool? What changed in mental health, getting help, or those that end up not getting help, and it escalates to this?
Right.
How is it that a public school parent can, or previously public school parent, can now say, I'm going to homeschool, because this is just compounding year after year? And I think everywhere, all across the country, we can see that that's an issue.
The country.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
Sorry.
And
I have something in my eye. So I'm not making
okay.
faces at you. I'm sorry.
But it just
Continue.
solidified.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it just solidified, like, man, I made the right choice. And I was like, man, I have to talk to Denisha about this, because she was a homeschooled child. And so I'm like, what are your thoughts on this? And how is this shaping our children into adults? What are those caveats to each option that grows us into who we are and changes our perception and the way that we just carry ourselves?
Yeah, and I was homeschooled but not homeschooled, and I then was thrown into public school for the first time, and I have, a lot of the things that are happening right now in our country is not new. And I think a lot of parents and just people in general are just like, wow, this is new. And I'm like, no, it's not new. It's just that your kid is finally at that age to see it for the first time. But mental health has gotten worse, though. That's what we're seeing, is that especially with COVID, there was a lot of isolation, and it actually triggered for me a lot of the isolation I experienced in homeschooling. Because when I say I was homeschooled, I'm going to be very clear what I mean. We were put in front of a TV. That was our homeschooling teacher. We watched, I knew what time of day it was by what was on the television. I Love Lucy in the spring was on at 10 a.m. But in the summer it was on at 11. Like, we just knew this. Like, it was just a reality. It's kind of funny. I'm going to say this and people are going to go, wow. We didn't get to watch things like Harry Potter or Pokemon, but we were allowed to watch Jerry Springer and Judge Judy. Like, it was just kind of what we did. So we knew, like, the crazy be crazy. It's kind of like, wow. But we most homeschool setups are that you have a group that you're doing life with, and you go out and you get the kids with other kids. We did not experience that. We were actually just kept at home all of the time. There were periods of time that we were with a group here and there, but it was very rare. It was usually like every other year they would find a homeschool group to attach to, and then they went independent. So the mental health of us was not good. Depression was high. Anxiety was high. I was isolated. I wasn't the awkward kid in the sense of, like, I didn't know how to talk to people, but I think I was over, like, anytime I was with people, it was like, oh my God, people, like, hello. Like, it's just over the top, and then also very timid and scared. So it was just very much like isolation. Then I was thrown into high school. Now, when it comes to, I think, mental health, let's first talk about the schooling aspect, the differences between the
Yeah.
two, and then we're gonna jump into mental health, because I feel like we're gonna be
Mhm.
end up being there a little bit more. I don't want to pass
Right.
over the homeschool versus public school. But what
Yeah.
in your so you were public schooled and then you were
Yeah.
homeschooling your kids. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I think the society looks at homeschooling in the way that you were sheltered and defined as homeschooled,
Yes.
but it wasn't
Yes.
truly homeschooled. Whereas
It's not that.
there's an overwhelming, and I tell parents this now all the time, there's an overwhelming amount of resources to successfully homeschool that it's almost, you have to be intentional to fail at it, because it's just
Right.
skyrocketed in the last 20
Hmm.
years. And it's wonderful to
Right.
see. But too many people are afraid to do it because they are afraid of failure, which is totally fine. You need to just find a community
Right.
that you feel supported in and you get the support you need. This is not for every
Right.
parent or every family. There are, I forget what they're not IEPs. I think they're ISPs, where it's something you can have a tutor. The state will help you if you pull your child because of bullying or what have
Mm-hmm.
you. I'd have to look at, there's a specific three code letter that is similar to IEPs in school, but for homeschoolers. And that's a whole different
Okay.
process that I don't have specific information on myself because we haven't utilized that. We don't need it, but
We'll
it's out
actually put
there.
it in the description. We'll
Yes.
find it.
Yep. So we'll get the information. Yeah, because
We'll
there's
find it and put
wonderful
it there.
resources out there, and each state also has their own benefits. Like we get $1,000 tax deduction or a tax credit. I'm sorry, we don't get a deduction. We get a credit for doing homeschooling, which is great because that
Mm.
encourages you to say, okay, this is what we're doing. Other states actually give refunds or they give credits and they say, here is what you can use toward that. You just have to document and send the receipts in. And I think that incentive really supports families to be successful, where they're like, I have no clue where to start. But for me, I had to look at our state and say, okay, there's so much freedom here to homeschool. Indiana is one of the most free states. You don't have to report, you don't have to send anything in. I've done some podcasts where I
Right.
explain that you should always have a safety net and you should document things, because if you don't, you will
Right.
regret it one day, because there are people who don't agree with that, and that's okay. That's their choice. But don't allow your children to suffer in the homeschooling aspect because you want more freedom and time for yourself. That is not what this is about, and I will never support and advocate for that.
Right.
When I say homeschooling, I want to give my children more opportunities that you can't get in an 8-hour day because you just don't have time to cater to 20, 25, 30 kids. And then you get into the middle school and high school and you're circling in 100, 120, 150 children, if not more, in those different class periods. So coming
Mhm.
from the public school, I would not say that I suffered in any way possible. I went on to cheer in college. I really loved it. I enlisted in the army and all of that. But I will say there was a sense of lack in my life. I always sought validation outside of my home because I wasn't getting it there. So I knew I could get it elsewhere. And
Mhm.
I recognized that my parents, for me to be in public school, meant that they could either work more or longer. They could be hands off and blame it on something else. Nothing against them, but they just didn't parent. You look at 90s children and we were outside
Mhm.
until the lights went off on because it was so dark. And then you just kind of raised yourself in that environment. And I thought to myself,
Mhm.
I don't want my
Mhm.
children to raise themselves. That's not a home. And I know you and I had talked about kind of what does it look like as a family dynamic of how do you submit to your husband? How do you keep that role together when you are home and
Right.
working? But you have to recognize like there are pieces that you can bring into the homeschool life, the work from home life, two parent household
Yeah.
that don't have to be that specific 60s family or 90s family. You can take the good
Right.
pieces out
Right.
of all of them to create your own dynamic. And that's the beauty of where we
Right.
are in this world now. And you and I being able to
Mhm.
podcast and talk in the middle of the day, it's just one of those beauties of we've created our own lives in this kind of
Right.
like it's not necessarily a box because you can literally think outside of
Right.
the box now and create whatever it is you want. So when I recognized public school was just too narrow almost, because you have to think the state is changing these education laws and their statutes year
Right.
after year. Politicians are coming in, they're removing things. it's not linear and it's also not systematic to cater to each child. And so I recognized, okay,
Right.
this is almost too boxy and limiting.
Mm,
And so I thought,
mm-hmm.
I had no clue going into the real world how to do my taxes. I actually was audited one year and owed $6,500. And I was like, I had no clue I needed to do these quarterly, or
Gosh.
I had no clue. And I'm like, great, I have to set up a payment plan because no one taught me. And it was my first year hiring a
Right.
CPA with a
Right.
1099 and a Schedule C. Like little things that I thought, man, I do not want my children to go into the real world and have to fork over a lot of money that they could have been doing in increments and never understand why they somehow are now in a black pit of
100%.
debt. So homeschooling for me
And
is structured.
yeah. And this is the thing is that I want to say this up front because this is a firm belief that I have that I'm not speaking for you, Hannah, but I'm speaking from my own perspective. I do
Mm-hmm.
not feel and think that it is the public school's job to teach children how to do their taxes. I think that that is the
Right.
parent's role, and the parent's role needs to do that. Now, I do believe that maybe we should have some basic things in this, the we used to have them like home ec classes, business
Mm-hmm.
classes, versus like money management things. Like I do think that we could add those in, but I don't think it should be
Mm-hmm.
the responsibility of an English teacher to teach home ec stuff. I don't think that.
Oh no,
I mean,
no.
we should bring it back. We should really bring it back. Put it as an elective, and I really think that it would be helpful to have everyone learn these
Mm-hmm.
things, but it is the job of the parent. However, the parents are just not doing it, and that is what we see across the
Yeah.
board. Is like I have a lot of friends who are teachers, so I'm standing up for my
Mm-hmm.
teachers right now.
No, I totally
Like if you
understand.
teach English, you teach math,
Yeah,
you teach a sport. That is what you went to go and teach. It should not be your
exactly.
job to try to teach your student time management. However, I do believe that we should bring those classes back into the high schools and middle schools because I do think that those would be best for everyone to learn. But parents, it is time to step up and teach your children how to do
It
things
is.
like do your taxes. But also
Yeah.
friends like Google, like do you know any
Right.
programs? Like if you were in your 30s, I hear this from a lot of 30-year-olds where they're like, "Well, I never learned it." And it's like Google, y'all, has been around since
Right.
when? Like we are fine. Like just Google it.
Mhm.
But it is complicated when we learn things for the first time in our 30s. It is hard
Mhm.
to learn things in our 30s. And I did have a huge from preschool, you guys, to the middle of my freshman year, I had very minimal education, and what I had was from TV and what I learned by myself. I literally taught myself how to read at the age of 9 by putting in cassette tapes into, if you know, old school, little tiny tapes inside your radio and pushing play and reading along to memorize what I thought the word was on the paper. And then to teach myself math, I would look at my sister's like I mean, it was like multiplication and division, but I would look at my sister's books in the back for the answers, and then I would try to figure out how they got there. So this is really hard with dyslexia because dyslexia flips everything. So I could get to the answer by looking at the answer and then figuring it out backwards, but then actually having to do the problem without the answer became nearly impossible for me. So when it came to coming into high school for the first time, it was like this crash course into learning. It had nothing to do with like a lack of, I mean, there was a lot of stuff in the school, but there was a lot of behavioral issues. There was a lot of, like I was in a school it was a lower poverty school. And it was one of those things where it was just kind of like, don't get in trouble. Don't be heard, don't do anything, but there was no parent involvement, and the schools were used to that. And I actually recently visited my high school, and it's so cool because the principal who is there now was the ASB director when I was in high school. She's now the principal, and she was like, "Man, Denisha, like it is so hard to get high school parents involved in their kids' lives. They just are like, they're in high school, they don't need me." And she's like, this is when the kids are like, I want my parents involved, and they won't get involved. So regardless, homeschooling or not, like we need to be involved in our kids' life. And I think that really is going to show where our mental health is of our young adults right now. Now, we do see that when someone is homeschooled, they have a higher SAT, ACT, understanding of curriculum. Like there's more time in the day for them to do really neat things, like go to a museum without having to be in the summer and crowded.
Mhm.
But it doesn't mean, and I don't want, this is what I don't want somebody here is saying, well, you're less than because you're homeschooling or not homeschooling your
Mhm.
kids, or you as the person who went through the public school, you're not smart enough. It's not about that. That's not what we're saying.
Right.
But what we have seen is an increase. And I think that this is really where we come in, is not even just like, hey, homeschool or not homeschool. What we
Mhm.
are looking at is a lack of parent involvement in the
Yes.
child's life. That
Mhm.
was what you desired. That's what I desired. Like on both sides, there was that
Yeah.
neglect of where our parents were. So we both looked outside of the home for that
Mhm.
attention.
Yeah.
But can I ask a
Absolutely.
personal question?
Oh, for sure.
Um, did you suffer from any mental health issues at all?
No, personally, I do have siblings that have, though. I will say that I
Mm.
have siblings that have. So
Mm.
if we go down like the genetic predisposition, then that is obviously there. But I personally did not. I don't
Right.
know if I blame that on like oldest child syndrome or what have you, of where you just like toe the
Right.
line and you
We didn't have
power
time.
through and you're like just get out and survive. But I would say that I didn't develop any kind of anxiety until I think after I had my oldest, and that was just a little bit of like
Mm.
isolation, and it was inflicted on myself,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But I would say after
Mm.
each child I felt more empowered after, and I was like, I am made for
Oh, I love
this.
that.
So I
Mm.
it had nothing to do
I
with that.
love
I did
that.
say I did think that like I sought love and attention out of, older men. I
Mm.
would say that that is something that stemmed from that, of like I need a role
Mm.
figure, a role model and a father figure or something like that. So I always dated
Right.
older, and
Mm.
I came from a broken home, like a divorced household. So that does play a role.
Yeah.
But other than that, self-worth was a huge thing.
I'm really glad you said that, because I think what we do is we clump in emotional wounds with mental
Uh-huh.
health. We just kind of like, oh,
Mhm.
you must have had anxiety and depression because your parents weren't involved. It's like, no, 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 but
Mhm.
I did have a lack of, and I desired
Yeah.
their attention, and it did create certain behaviors that you were able to pull back from. And
Mhm.
I know for myself, depression and anxiety for me is more situational
Mhm.
versus like genetic. It is
Yeah.
genetic. There is the genetic disposition that I have. Funny,
Mhm.
not funny fact, sad fact. I found I did like a DNA test just to see what my
Mhm.
like genetics would be. Both
Oh, yeah.
ADHD and ADHD schizophrenia popped up on mine, which is what
Oh,
my
wow.
great grandmother had on my mom's side. So I was like,
Mhm.
oh, that mix that with trauma, and that's why it looks like
Mhm.
schizophrenia or ADHD,
Mhm.
is because when
Mhm.
you are putting that in, like that's how the body can respond. But it's
Right.
interesting to sit back and kind of say like, okay, there is a difference. And I think this is what we've gotten really
Mhm.
bad at, is we have
Mhm.
said, oh, you must have had like you had some emotional, I wouldn't even say like not emotional disparities, but like you had emotional wounds. And a lot of people would be like, oh, yeah, that's anxiety, that's depression. And you're like, no, no,
Right.
there is a clear distinction. Like I have felt
Right.
both, and I agree with you, clear
Mhm.
distinction. But
Mhm.
what we have forgotten about is when we are children, there
Mhm.
is a higher, I was pulling it up as you were talking because I wanted to make sure the statistics were correct, is that when we are looking at child and adolescent mental health, we do see that
Mhm.
nearly National Institutions of Health, NIH.gov, says that nearly 20% of children from the ages of 3 to 17 in the United States have a mental, emotional, developmental, or behavioral disorder. Now, what
Mhm.
this means for people who may not know is that that doesn't mean it's anxiety or depression. Sometimes
Mhm.
what we have done is we have clumped in behavioral issues because of lack of
Mhm.
parent involvement, because that behavioral is impacting the classroom, that we've gone, oh, he has a behavioral disorder, instead of maybe that child who is more anxious or more
Mhm.
energetic. We don't get them outside enough. They're sitting in the classroom for 8 hours a day. They're literally bored. We see this
Yeah.
among boys a lot. Boys' mental health, they actually say that there is a gender gap between boys and girls in terms of who is likely to reach mental health support. Boys
Mhm.
feel that it is, they have said that like we need to hide it or suppress the feelings when we feel sad. Like this is what
Mhm.
young boys have said. And that is according to Boys' Mental Health from Charlie Health. You guys can look that up. But when it comes to classroom disruption or autism for mental
Mhm.
health disorder, we do that more boys are diagnosed with it in the US than girls. 4 in 100 boys have it versus 1 in 100 girls have it. And that is something that sometimes the behavior is based off of environment, not actual genetic. And then there is the genetic. And so this is one of those things that I think we have to be very mindful that there are going to be some parents who are like, this child needs, they need more structure. They need, I can't do it on my own. And public school is great for that option. And then there is going to be that some other children, it's same diagnosis, same situation where parents are going to go, I'm going to need to homeschool them because this is better for my child. And that is what we're talking about. We're not shaming. We're not coming down and being like, well, if you have autism or mental health or this or that, you have to homeschool. It's like, what is best for your kid? Wherever you do this, homeschool or public, you need to be involved though. And that I feel like, so you said something that was kind of funny about your daughter, where it was like, you're like, okay, I want to be involved. What did she tell you, or tell your other child? That was really funny when you told me that before we started. So let's talk about that smothering.
My 9-year-old is constantly telling us that our 5-year-old smothers her, and our 5-year-old is such a lover, like wants to be everyone's friend and hug them. And my oldest
poor
is
thing.
like, yes, and but that's another reason why I think if I sent her to public school, she would be completely worn down and her personality would be dried up, because she just thrives on go, 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 bouncing off the walls. And the way that she learns is not through paper and pencil and even audible. Like she has to be hands-on. She has to repeat it hands-on and have different techniques to be taught. That someone would think that she does have ADHD, but our doctor said she just has sleep apnea, which we are mitigating because she kind of snores. And because she doesn't get a true REM cycle of sleep, she's just crazy all the time. And so it's interesting, when I looked up the study, I'll find it too. And sleep apnea can mimic ADHD because they're not getting all of that energy out. And my 9-year-old just loves to be caught in a book, quiet. Like I don't have to worry about her ever. She did 3 weeks of book work the other day, and I thought, okay, I guess we're moving on to the next thing, because I don't know what else to give you. And she goes, oh, I'm just going to take a 3-week break. And I thought, technically in the real world, you could do that if you get ahead in certain careers. However, like I have to keep you going. You're not taking a 3-week break right now. So you just recognize,
babe, that's not how it works.
Yeah, you just recognize how different they learn.
funny.
But with us being present, I do realize that to one, it is just the greatest thing ever. And then the other one is, but she is a preteen, so she's getting up there into like, I need my space, I need some quiet, hormones are changing. And I recognize how much she is appreciated this time, the ability to create her own schedule in her mind. You know, we do have a chart and everything. We are pretty structured. She knows that I work in different increments, but she has this flexibility of, if I do XYZ, then my outcome is XYZ, and then I can do whatever it is else that I want. Whereas my 5-year-old is still a 5-year-old and just excited as all get out, and just has the attention span of a goldfish, and is loving on her 1-year-old twin siblings, and everyone's just chaotic running around, which is fine. You know?
For those who don't know, goldfish have how many seconds of attention span?
It's like 3 at most,
it's like 3 seconds, something like that. But it's fun.
It's something so
but
short.
But also she's 5, and I think you bring up a really good point, is that when you're able to be involved in the education, if they're in public school or in homeschooling, being involved, you're able to advocate on the behalf of your child. And so things like medications aren't going to be forced. Sorry, I keep yelling. Oh my gosh. So I'm so sorry, everybody. It's been a long day. Certain medications aren't going to be forced, but in the classroom of it being like 8 hours a day at 5 years old, that has to be a lot for a child to handle. And so we do see things like worn out, children are worn out. And then you have, a 5-year-old who's going 8 hours a day in public school with all these children. And then there is extra behavioral issues. Maybe they're not sleeping at night. I know, a big thing is sometimes we don't even know if our child is introverted or extroverted. Like we don't even know that yet. Like, I mean, you can see it at 1 or 2 years old if they're going to be super outgoing or if they're going to be super like, I'm going to be in the corner and be okay. And there have been times that I think in mom circles where we start to freak out about our kid, and it's like, just breathe. Like, if your child does have something like ADHD or autism, that's not an easy journey, but there are things that can help with that. And that's where we need to surround people instead of being like, well, you should homeschool. It's like, maybe that family can't afford to do that. Maybe they can't afford to have one income. I know I live in California. It's expensive out here. We have to have multiple incomes to be able to survive. And that's not an option. That's not something where it's like, we just want more money. It's literally like, if we don't have that, like, yes, we could move out of state, yes we could, but there's family here, we don't have family in other states. So it's like, you have to do with what is right for you and your family. And it like, again, even if it's like, maybe you're not getting the right resources at the school, like, then you should be able to move your kid to a different school to get that resource. And I think it is hard. It's hard to know what to do until you're kind of faced with those situations. Like, is homeschooling good? Is public school not? Can you walk us through, because you homeschool the kids, what does a typical day look like for you?
Oh my gosh.
Because I think some people think it has to be like 10 hours.
No. So some days, so my oldest goes to her dad's on the weekends. If she gets home late on Sunday, she will stay up until midnight because her Duolingo, it starts to roll over to the next day, and she's like, I just want to knock it out now so I don't have to do it tomorrow. And I'm like, you know what, you go, girl. And she's on like a 167-day streak, and so most Mondays are a lot slower. We do have co-ops on Tuesdays and Thursdays, which are, it's a whole different group of ages. So we have everyone from like, I think 3 or 4 all the way up to 12, which is nice, but they all have different workbooks. So their workbooks are specified by not just age, but by grade level that they're at. So like, my oldest is at upper elementary, even though technically she'd be in lower elementary. That's just what she is at and really good at. My 5-year-old is at pre-reader. She is not a strong reader. Like I said, cannot sit there and just focus. But I have to pull books from her and be like, you have to sleep. You're developing bags because you're reading a 350-page book at 2 a.m.
You're 9 with bags, girl.
I'm like, get it together.
That's funny. So, that's funny though. She's like, but Mom, if I can get through this book.
I know. I always say she's gonna be my night shifting girl, which is fine. If that's where she thrives, good for her. It's quiet. I applaud her for already knowing her path in life. But we have co-ops twice a week. We don't always do this co-op. Some of the topics we're just not going to study that. At least just not right now. Like, they did a Christmas one, and we don't celebrate Christmas. We are trying to study more of what the biblical feasts look like and just kind of pull away from consumerism. Economically is one reason. And then as we study the Bible more, we are not legalists by any means, obviously. Like, I have tattoos, but I just want to say, we do study the Bible because it's very interesting, and we are Bible believers. We don't have a specific home church, but my girls do go to Awana. I don't know if you guys have Awana out there, but it's similar to VBS, but they meet weekly. So it's a couple hours weekly. And I mean, it just varies. We have book work. I do one day where we do history. We sit down and watch a documentary and we study over it. And I really like that my oldest is so strict with her schoolwork that I can put more time and energy into the hands-on things that my 5-year-old needs. We just practiced with real scissors yesterday and making sure we're staying along the lines, Terrifying. Just things that are she did really well. So I'm like, okay, if this is your thing that you're good at, then that's great. Okay. So
just crafts and stuff. I love it. I love it. But that also allows applicable. And I think too, what comes to mind is, from what I've heard a lot of moms say, is like, well, I'm not going to be able to walk them through 3rd grade, or I struggle with math. So what do you do if you have a subject Oh my goodness. Keep yawning. What, sorry. If you like for you, if you were struggling with a subject, like if you struggled with math, how would
Mhm.
you teach them math? Because I think that really comes
Yeah.
into a lot of these conversations too.
Mhm. Yeah. So uh, I call my oldest a little George Washington. She taught herself to read and she's been teaching herself math. Thankfully, her dad and my husband
Mm.
are are both really good at math. However, that we do
Oh, good.
utilize
Okay.
OutSchool on occasion. OutSchool has tutors, and I can give you guys a $20 credit or whatever if you want to learn about homeschooling. And they do have
Yeah.
fun classes too.
Yeah.
So we've done, excuse me, we've done some book clubs on there. There are just so many
Yeah.
resources where you can connect with a tutor for free. Now you got me going. Instead of
Yeah.
yawning, I'm getting
Sorry.
a.
I yawned.
It's
I wasn't
okay.
coughing. Just kidding.
I'm like catching the other side of, but
If you need to take a drink, I can take over for a little bit.
I think I'm good.
We could
So
sit in awkward
you,
silence.
that's okay. So you just kind of find resources. There are so many out there. It's
Yeah.
almost overwhelming. Like I said, you just don't know where to start. But once you find one, you go down that path and you're like, wow, I didn't know this existed. And then this existed. Why was I not using this? This could have been so much easier. But I definitely
Right.
utilize a lot of videos. And I learn with them. There are
Yeah.
things that you just don't realize you didn't retain until you go through it and you're like, oh, wow, that's actually really
Yeah. Yeah.
useful.
And I think that that's where a lot of people forget. Like, that's just what happens is sometimes we forget.
Yeah.
I remember talking to a friend I went to high school with, and she was just like, we never learned this in high school. I was like, no, we didn't. You didn't learn it in high school. I did. And we were in the same class together. You were ditching. She's like,
That's
oh,
funny.
yeah, probably. I was like, nah, bro. Like, you literally missed the lesson because you didn't show up to school that day. But I do think that it is difficult to determine if you want to homeschool or if you want a public school. I don't think either one is wrong. I think it really
Right.
depends on the family. It depends on the child. It depends on the situation
Mhm.
and season of life too. I know
Oh,
some
for
people who
sure.
have gone back and forth between it. But I do know like it was rough going from from homeschooling to public school. And I do believe that the reason was because there was such a big lack of education that I didn't have,
Yeah.
that it was not easy for me. Like I remember, so let me paint a picture here. I jumped into 6 core classes. And I remember being in like period 3, and I was like, had never been in a class in my life. And I only ever studied like just math and then just reading and then just watching TV, like that. I'm telling
Mhm.
y'all, like that's what I did. And it was most days I didn't do anything. So then I just jumped into 6 periods at a time,
Mhm.
and I couldn't get some of the material that I needed to do this project. And I jumped in when the school year started in August. I jumped in March. So we came back from Christmas
Mm.
break in January. I didn't start until March. So imagine like most of these schools that ends in June, early
Mhm.
June. So it was one of those things where it was like, okay, well, you have a final project that you have to do that if you don't do, you get an F. And it's like, I
Yeah.
started in March, like, and now we're doing this heavy project that I'm like, everybody else had like 3 months already.
Mhm.
I'm coming into the last 3 months of it, March, April, May, June. Yeah, last 3 months of it. And I'm just trying to figure this out. So I remember the teacher, we were creating it like this dress because I was doing like a home ec class that I had to do sewing.
Yeah.
I didn't want to take this class, but I was forced to. And she looks at me and she's like, well, how come you don't have most of this done? And I was like, I started a week ago. And she's just like, there's no excuse. And I was just like, I started crying. And I was like, I am
Aw.
learning for the first time how to have 6 classes. I'm
Yeah.
overwhelmed. I'm jumping in the middle of the semester. And she's like, go to the principal's office. And I was like, I'm done. And I like walked over and they were just like, what's going on? And I was like, I've only been here a week and she wants me to have this done. And I don't have a sewing machine at home. And he's like, well, did you buy one? And I was like, I can't afford it. Like, y'all don't put your kids in classes that you can't get the material for. Like this,
Yeah.
I was like set up for failure. And
Mhm.
so it was just really frustrating because it was just like, okay, I have obviously have a lack of math, English, science, and all of those things, and reading.
Hmm.
I when I was put into my freshman year of high school, I was at a third grade math level and a fifth grade reading level, so very low
Hmm.
compared to where I should be. Now, then trying to learn how to sew, like I didn't know what I was
Yeah.
doing, but it was one of those situations that I was like, wow, I think that was why I struggled so much. But I eventually
Hmm.
caught on to the gist of like a heavy
Hmm.
load of classes.
Yeah.
But that's what not to do, you guys. Like if you put your
Hmm.
kid in school, make sure you put them in at the beginning of the semester or the beginning of
Yeah.
the year. Don't wait till the middle of a semester and then say, yeah, let me just throw you in and see if you can swim. Not very good.
Yeah.
But you know, also like to the hardest part I think is taking somebody out of school. I think some
Hmm.
parents will say, why don't you wait until the semester is over, so that they
Right.
get the grade and stuff like that. And to a point,
Hmm.
I do agree with that,
Hmm.
unless it is something where the child's health is at risk.
Yep.
But even so, like check in if you can't find a homeschooling group. I know school districts will do like at home curriculum for some students
Yes.
and stuff. So check in to see if your district has that, where there's still
Hmm.
like a teacher will meet with them and things like that. There's
Hmm.
things to do. But I think so many of us are just like, well, my kid, I can't be at home with my kid all day. And it's like,
Yeah.
I get that. But
Hmm.
still, you can be present. And I
Yes.
think that's really what is missing with our kids today,
Hmm.
all of our kids today out there, is that the parents are
Yeah.
missing. And if
Exactly.
you're like, nope, I'm not, I'm involved. It's like, yeah, but we know other kids in our community whose parents are
Hmm.
not able to be present. Now, sometimes it
Yeah.
is because of work and sometimes it's because of they just don't desire to be
Hmm.
present. So it's like,
Right.
how do we show up well for those
Hmm.
kids and invite them into our
Hmm.
home to where it's like, hey, we're like not just the kid, but the parents too, like be
Right.
community with each other. How do we do that?
Yes.
Especially when, we have different beliefs or different things that we
Hmm.
like to follow.
Yeah, that's a great question. I always think of I was that child that was always the guest in other homes. And I was always
Same.
with someone else's family for dinner. I was always being
Right.
carpooled somewhere. My mother was not the carpooling mom. And you recognize, and if you can categorize them just in that simplified way, who is inviting everyone's children over, who is carpooling, those are the
Mm-hmm.
present parents.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
if there's no balance, how present are you? What is it that is pulling you away from the sports or what other activities you're putting your child in that other parents are taking them to? And this isn't meant to be convicting. However, if you're getting calls from a school and they're like your child is failing or you're having parent teacher conferences, maybe it is time to evaluate, is that extracurricular activity necessary because someone else is taking them to it? What can I do to step up and say, maybe it's me? Maybe it's me. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
I need to do something, because I told my parents over and over
Mm-hmm.
again, you're not parenting. You're just there. And how many times did I walk all over them and did whatever I wanted because they weren't going to do
Right.
anything about it anyway? They weren't present. It didn't matter. And I knew that.
Yeah.
I knew the outcome. So I
Right.
guess the gist of like getting to be community is, are like, we have neighbors that send their children to public school, but guess what? They thought, I had a picture pop up in Facebook from a year ago. They thought my twins had RSV again. They immediately sent over a meal, and I was like, "What are you doing here?"
Mm.
They're like, "Oh, did the twins not
I
have
thought you guys were
RSV?"
so.
And I said, "No." I said, "That
That was a
picture's
year
from
ago.
a year ago. They didn't even look at the
Sorry. Go.
date
Thank
on it."
God. Yeah.
But
Oh, they just
that's
ran over with food.
community. Yes.
That's
And so
adorable. Not.
that's what
Yeah.
you
That's
want.
cute.
You want that
Yeah.
community, even though you
Yeah.
live very different lives. It doesn't have to just be community in the public school or the homeschool. You should
Absolutely.
just be
Absolutely.
community regardless, and understand
Yeah.
that each family has a different need, and how can we help them, because
Right.
life is seasonal. My husband has worked full time before
Yeah.
outside of the house. He's not now. He's more available for other people, which is great. And I can say, yeah, go help
Mm.
XYZ with whatever it is. And there's no guilt or
Right.
shame around that. But you also have to be
Yeah.
willing to take help as well and say, okay, I'm not in a position right now, but I can start offloading things that are on my plate so I can be more present. I think there has to just be ownership and accountability for not just our children, but the entire family, and recognition
Yeah.
for those who are helping us, because this goes into the mental health conversation of, is it our mental health that is starting to trauma dump on our own children and affect them? And it's not actually the homeschooling aspect or the public school, but it's our mental health is playing a huge role in what our children are experiencing. Because I would
Mm,
assume as an outsider, your mom's mental health affected your mental health to some degree, or at least affected your
100%.
education. So,
Oh, 100%. 100%. And that's something. So two things that you bring up that I think are really good points is that not only are we needing to look at our own plate and say,
mhm,
are we doing too much? But
mhm,
also our children's plate. Because if our children
yep.
is failing, maybe we are the most present person in our child's life. Maybe we are at every single game. We are going to every parent meeting. We are at every
Mhm.
school event, but they're still failing or they're not doing well
Yeah.
or they're exhausted all the time. And it is that moment to say, what can we take off your plate? Because I
Yeah.
think that this is really crazy that I'm learning this myself is, I own my own business and I run my own business
Mhm.
and then I do speaking events within that and I coach people and
Mhm.
I do all of that. But then on the side, what I was also doing was I was teaching full time somewhere at a
Mhm.
university. Then I have my 2-year-old daughter. Then we were doing things outside of the home and I started to crash and burn. And
Yeah.
I decided, as of this year, I was like, it's time to step away. Like just lots of things are
Mhm.
happening and it's a lot of things that I'm just like, I'm not able to put the time
Mhm.
and effort into it that I think that is being required and where the
Yeah.
money coming in at is not it's not worth it at this point for me
Right.
personally. So I made the decision to step away from my emotional and mental health because I wasn't getting to bed
Mhm.
until like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning every single night.
Mhm.
And then if I was up with my daughter or like she got up
Mhm.
early or anything like that, that was impacting my ability to function. And I just was like
Yeah.
dead in the water. Like this just happened a couple weeks ago. Like I made the
Mhm.
decision. It was time to step away. And doing that, I was like, wow, I didn't even recognize how much time because I had thought it would be like 20 hours a week,
Mhm.
that I was pouring
Yeah.
into this. But then my daughter and my husband were
Mm.
also feeling the effects of me staying up till 2 o'clock in the morning. And they were,
Yeah.
they were just kind of like, my daughter's an empath. She feels what I feel. But now if I were to do
Mhm.
that and she's 2, where I'm like, okay,
Mhm.
we're going to go here and go there and do this and do that and not be present,
Yeah.
like her attitude is toward me was very different a couple weeks ago, where it was just
Mhm.
like very, very clingy, always crying. And
Yeah.
she's just more of just like, I want to be with you, but I was always on the phone
Mhm.
and she would be in every meeting with
Yeah.
me because she loved it. But she also I could just tell now
Right.
she still struggles when I walk out of the room, but she's gotten in a good rhythm of bedtime. I've gotten in a good rhythm of bedtime, and then
Mhm.
when she has those, I thought it was every night she was staying awake, but like or waking up in the middle of the
Mhm.
night. It was every
Mhm.
once in a while, but I had
Yeah.
recognized because I wasn't getting enough sleep that I was like it's
Mhm.
every night, and oh my gosh, and it was like
Yeah.
every once in a while. And that was insane to me because I'm like, wow, like it's not just our child's plate that we have to analyze. We also have to
Mhm.
analyze our own plate and say,
Yeah.
like, is my energy going to the right things? And is that making me a
Mhm.
present parent? And I think that is the
Mhm.
hardest thing. Now, you guys, I'm not talking about like, no, don't go hang out with friends. Don't do self care. I'm
Yeah.
not talking about that. I'm just saying, like me, I literally had a part time job in addition to my full time job and then had
Mhm.
everything else on my plate. And it was
Yeah.
just pulling me in a separate direction of where we were actually going that it
Mhm.
was just a lot for me to handle.
Mhm.
Now I had a lot on my plate at 15 like that. I remember
Mhm.
not doing well in school because of all the stuff I had on my plate. If
Yeah.
someone had come and said, hey, this thing that you're doing over here, that's not giving you energy or motivation to do well in school, which really would have been like not having to raise my siblings and my
Mhm.
parents stepping in to do that. I think I would have been actually able to focus on school, but I wasn't able to do
Mhm.
that because of the situation.
Mhm.
So I think that's a very valid point to be like, let's analyze what is actually on our plate, what is a need to
Yeah.
do, and what is a want to do, and what can we push
Mhm.
off for a little bit? Like maybe it's
Right.
not time for sports if we're all struggling to get sleep. Maybe it's
Yeah.
time to say, okay, put your book away. You don't need to stay up till
Mhm.
2 o'clock in the morning doing homework, homeschooled or not.
Yeah.
Put your book down. Bedtime is at 10, like
Yeah.
for age appropriate, of course. But I think we don't do that enough. We're just like, just push through, push through, push through. And then 7 years
Mhm.
later, we're like, oh, we have all these health issues. And I think it's because
Yes.
we're just pushing through instead of stopping
Yeah.
and saying, okay, what is going on? Why is this so heavy?
Yeah. 100%. And then you think, and you don't realize it until you start to think about it. and you actually pull yourself
Mm-hmm.
back, you don't realize the mental health is starting to affect the physical health too. And you're like, man,
Yes,
why am
that
I
part.
achy? Why am I struggling? It's because your body has not had time to rest and recover because you are just
Why am I
bogging
panicking?
yourself
Yep.
down. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And
Well,
I started
like,
think, oh, I'm lagging. I'm back.
no, go ahead. Go ahead.
I
You're
was
good.
just thinking, how much anxiety am I creating for myself? A non-anxious person
Yeah.
most of the time. I'm very bullheaded, but how much am I
Right.
starting to allow to be created by what I am saying like yes to when I should be
Right.
saying no?
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, that's absolutely been living that the last couple weeks. Like I ended up
I
pulling
love
away from
the
a couple things because I'm
transparency.
like, I need to treat myself. I had to treat myself as if I was sick the last couple weeks just because I'm like, I need to like let my body get into a rhythm of being back to
Yeah.
sleep. And I have
Yeah.
felt very fatigued the last couple weeks. And it's because my body was so used to just going on nothing that it
Yeah.
was like I was gaining weight, I was having migraines, I was having physical
Oh.
pain, and most of that has gone away. Like I'm still feeling a little bit run down, but it
Mhm.
is like I just keep telling myself I'm sick. Like because I'm like I
Yeah.
was doing that for 4 years straight of and the last
Mhm.
especially the last 2 years with my daughter, 2.5 years with my daughter.
Yeah.
That's a lot to not get the right amount of sleep. So
Yes.
I think we do need to evaluate that and then ask like how are these things impacting my ability to show up or to be well. You
Mhm.
know, I should not be doing that all the time. Every once in a while, cool, but this should not be my routine to go from 7 o'clock in the
Right.
morning to 2 o'clock in the morning. That's not actually helpful for kids or for parents. And I think that's where, you know, when we land back on the topic of homeschooling is that it allows you to slow
Mhm.
down and say yes to the
Yes.
thing you want to say yes to versus
Mhm.
being told like your kid is in school Monday through Friday
Yeah.
from 8 a.m. in the morning till 2:30 or 3 or 4 or 6 for some kids
Mhm.
because of after school
Yeah.
programs. But it is harder when someone else is dictating what you can and cannot do with your schedule.
Right.
It's just harder,
Yeah.
which makes it more exhausting too. I feel like that's just a level of
Mhm.
exhaustion too to have people so in
Oh,
control of
for
our
sure.
schedules. It's hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything else you would like to add before we end?
No, I think
This
this
is a
was a
really good topic.
good, yeah. And I think
Yeah.
we touch on so many different things that this isn't going to just be homeschool parents and public school parents. It's going to be the
Right.
present parents. How do I stay present? What do I need to offload? What do I need to evaluate? Because I've been
Yeah.
there too. I know what it's like to
Mm-hmm.
say no to things and offload. And at
Right.
first, there's a sense of guilt, but once you do away
Yeah.
with it, you realize how much you don't need it and didn't actually want to participate in it. You're like, wow, this is so freeing.
And what's wild is that like the last week, probably like the last week, I've been kind of sitting back and being like, oh, it's not even that I didn't want to do it, was I wasn't doing it well. Like I
Oh, yeah.
thought like when looking back at it, I'm like, I was so burned out
Mm-hmm.
by going in 100 different directions. I actually like did the math of how many students I had every semester, and it was over 300 students in
Wow.
addition. So I'm like, I'm not just and this is where like I have to see the bigger picture because I just have
Yeah.
to. I'm like, wow, if I'm working a part-time job, and I want somebody to hear this, is like if you're working a part-time job in addition to a full-time job, you're not just giving your time to one person at this specific
Right.
employment place that you're there. You are giving to yourself to every customer, employee, every boss, every person that calls you on that phone. So do
Yeah.
the math. So in a day, you want to know why you're exhausted is if you are in an 8-hour day and you work with 1,000 people in a day where you're running meetings, working with customers, sending emails, doing all this stuff, and you go, why am I so tired? Right there. That's why.
Yeah.
It's because you're giving yourself to 1,000 people a day. Then you're coming home and giving yourself to your family and other things and then social media. So it's like when you sit back and you go, how many people am I actually giving myself to? And for me at first, it was like, it's just 15 hours. It's just 20 hours. It was, then I looked at it on the bigger scale and I was like, it was 350 people minimum in a 15-week span, in addition to my business, in addition to everything else.
Yeah.
And that's a lot. And that's there's no guilt or shame in me saying, okay, right now my time is over. And I had to take that, like, it felt relieving because I was like, oh, yeah, I should have been able to handle 15 or 20 hours. But when I looked at it on the larger scale of my energy going out to that many people, I was like, oh, that's a lot bigger. Oh, that's why I'm so tired. That's why my body feels fatigued. That's why my yeses, like that, all of it just kind of clicked in my brain. And I'm like, okay, so whoever is listening to that, like, be mindful, like when you're telling yourself like, well, it's only 15 hours, it's only 40 hours, it's only 60 hours, and you're like, I don't know why I'm drained. Start doing the math of how many things are you giving yourself to other people. And when you do that, you're like, that I need to say no, because this one thing of taking my kids to soccer might end up me giving myself to 50 people in an energy capacity that I just don't have right now. And that to me now, I'm saying no to things based off of that versus just, oh, it's 3 hours a week. It's like, okay, how many people are involved? How many people would I be serving? How much energy am I giving out? Okay, that's a lot more. I don't have the capacity for that right now. And that's okay. That's not a bad thing. It's just right now in my, I don't want to say my sick era, but in like my pullback era, pulling back and saying no, my no era, that's what I'm having to evaluate is, do I have the capacity to give that much to somebody? And I don't, because I'm just like that 5 hours a week is not just 5 hours a week. And so that I think is, we do need to see our where we're at as parents, and being able to be present sometimes requires that we evaluate what our energy goes to. And again, don't make yourself feel guilty or ashamed. Just know like that's part of the conversation that you have to have. And just make the decision that's best for you.
And these are hard conversations, but they have to be had.
They're so hard.
That's great. We're ending right there.
It's a lot. It's a lot. I love that. Yeah, it's a hard conversation. But you guys can have it. And then we're here to answer any questions that you might have. We'll link a bunch of the stuff that's at the bottom, especially if you're considering homeschooling or looking at trying to get more support from your school. We will also support some of the mental health stuff that we cited in the video, as well as just here to answer any questions that you guys might have about how to maybe say no to certain things, or how to evaluate if that's a no for you in the season. Follow along, make sure to subscribe, and we'll see you guys later. Have a good day.